Hello, everyone, and welcome to Practical Inclusion. I wasn't going to go live today, still plugging through April's task list and having all these extra long weekends. It's been a really busy month, but I've got a few things to say, so I have jumped on. I won't be on here for too long today, so if you are watching live, please jump on, throw your questions at me if you feel like it, if you've got some pressing questions or comment on the things I have to say. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I sit on today, which is the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present, and a big shout out to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are watching us live or on the replay. I saw some great posts last week about how white Australians can use their vote in this election to really, what's the right word? Towards reconciliation, right? That we can be very conscious about what all the parties are pushing forward in terms of their policies around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and we can make sure that our vote goes in the right direction from that perspective. So if there are, in the lead up to the election, if there are any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who would like to use this platform to talk about the things that do matter to them and the things that we should be considering when voting in this election, please reach out, and I'd love to have you on. I did want to, I really haven't been talking much in the last week about the crazy debate that continues to go on as part of the election campaign in terms of the incorporation of trans women in women's sport. Because quite honestly, I along with many of the other commentators, think that it is disgusting that we are even talking about this in an election. It is not an election issue. It's ridiculous that it's even got raised, and particularly that some of those politicians have a platform to spew their hate and ignorance out to the rest of it. And more importantly, that the media is picking that crap up and using it, because it's not an issue we should be discussing. However, it did make me, as I was thinking through my position on that and whether I was talking vocally on that or not, it did make me think about what underlies this whole rhetoric. Because sure, there are some people who very strongly believe that trans women, for example, shouldn't be playing women's sport. They're also the same people who actually don't believe that trans women are women, right? That's the core of the issue. But there's actually not a large portion, but there's a portion of the population, and I hear it because they are commenting to me and sending me messages, who actually do find that as much as they see themselves as trans inclusive, they do have difficulty with the idea of trans women playing women's sport. And so that's something, right, that we need to understand, is why people view the world through that lens when they're not those bigots who are actually generating and starting the conversations. And so it did remind me of a Twitter post that I saw quite a while ago now, but you can find it on Google because this Twitter post went crazy. And it was by Dr. Cherie Becker. And she posted this great thread about the history of women's sport. And it was really fascinating, some of the things that came up there. And one of the very first examples of specifically women's sport was actually back in 1902, when one woman, and I can't remember what the sport was, but she did really well in a sport. She entered because, of course, at that stage, it was just sport, right? Mainly only men played, but as a woman, she just entered because nothing said she couldn't, and she came second. And by the next year, they had a separate category for women. And she, in Cherie's tweet, she continues to show examples of this, where it has actually been, despite us thinking that women's sport exists so that women can win because it's not an equal playing field, right? That the reality is that women's sport was generated because women were actually winning or doing really well in sport. And so this idea was to segregate women and to place them outside of that traditional sporting and make sure that the men still got those opportunities and were able to win, right? So it's a really fascinating thread, and I'd encourage you to go and check it out and read it, because what it leads to is what's been, I guess, gurgling away in my brain for quite a while now, having quite an involvement in the administration of in my case, cricket, is why we segregate our sport by gender anyway. And I know this is a bit of a controversial topic, and people think, and people have shut me down quite often when I've raised this question, and others have just thought about it quite pensively for a long time. But why do we create, and let me give a practical example. I'm working in cricket. 3 years ago, there was only one women's cricket team in this region. Now there's over 250 women playing cricket in a women's competition, women and non-binary gender diverse people. And I think to myself, why will women come to those spaces and play sport? And why can't we engage our women and our gender diverse people in the existing sport, right? In the men's sport. So cricket, for example, has been male dominated in this region for so long. And the reality is, for those of us who have played cricket for a long time and have the skills, we have no issue playing men's cricket. I don't bat an eyelid. I love going to play. I don't have an issue from a skill perspective because I've played for a long time and I've learnt my craft. Now, 250 women who are playing in the local competition, most of them are new to the game. So they're learning because they never got the opportunities when they were young to play. It wasn't acceptable for them to play. There wasn't the facilities and the capacity for them to play. And so now they're learning. So they're coming from a lower skill base. That's true. But for those of us who don't come from a lower skill base, why do we play women's cricket? I play women's cricket because the behaviour in men's cricket is disgusting. And because I have no interest in spending my Saturday afternoons, because the format is different, and I have no interest spending my Saturday afternoons playing in that environment where I'm constantly witnessing bad behaviour, misogynistic tendencies, men acting like children in front of children who are playing, the violence and aggression that comes out. The issue to me is not that we need to segregate sport by gender, it's that we need to create safe, supportive spaces for everybody to play sport. And that's why I think there is such a growth in women's sport at the moment, because those women don't feel safe and supportive to play in the existing sporting competitions. And because we have this ridiculous idea that we need to segregate sport by gender. Now, if we do want to delve into that trans women in sport issue for a second, my kind of really simple answer to all of this is threefold, I think. Trans women are women. Let's stop this conversation. It's a ridiculous conversation to be had because they're women playing women's sport. Start and end. We never limit somebody's ability to participate in a sport because of either their size or their athleticism. If a woman shows up to play and she is 6'4" and she's built like a truck and she's amazing at her craft, we don't say, sorry, we don't have a place for you. We actually put her in the highest grade. So the whole premise of this argument just doesn't exist, because sport should be segregated based on ability and skill and not on gender. And I don't want to talk more about that because I think that that's an argument we don't need to be having. But what I do want to talk about is why people feel threatened by the idea that trans women would play women's sport. Or even for those who don't actually believe that trans women are women, that men should play women's sport. It shocks people to the core, right, that this could be an eventuation. And why is it? Is it because this idea that, that the women are damsels in distress and they need to be protected from the big, strong men? If you really unpick and think about this topic further and think about why people have such a strong opinion against it, it makes us think more about how society is structured, and it brings us right back to the whole conversation around gendered segregation, gendered expectations, and stereotypes. So I'm going to stop on that topic now because it does fascinate me, but it's also disgusting and awful that we're having this debate constantly. And so please, for those who are listening, if you hear people having these conversations, educate yourself so that you can respond quickly, cut it off, be that ally that you need to be in those conversations. What I am seeing is actually an incredible opportunity to raise the awareness and understanding of gender within our society, particularly within this country we call Australia, that really is held tightly by these gendered expectations and stereotypes. Ask people questions, drill into really what's bothering them about the issue, and be that true ally that you can be. There are some amazing articles and posts coming out right now, and this is what I'm absolutely loving to see, that we are getting information and we are hearing opinions from those who this issue truly impacts, and you can go and find those people and amplify their voices and really build on this. I see on Facebook there's a trend to post. Oh, sorry, my camera's gone fuzzy again. I'll turn that off for a second and get us back on. But there's these great posts on Facebook where people are saying, you know, leave trans kids out of this political debate, etc., etc. And it would be really great if you jump on there and do the same thing. Do what makes sense for you in terms of your allyship, but make sure you build your education. Now, before I go on to the next topic, now we're on the wrong camera, so I'll shift over and we'll keep going anyway. I did also, now I'm trying to remember what it was that I also wanted to talk about today. That's right, around a session last week around recruitment bias. And you know, nothing surprises me too much now when I run these types of sessions, because you get very similar answers and responses. But it did, you know, reiterate to me this idea. I spend a lot of my time talking about how we fix the recruitment system. So how we need to modify our recruitment processes and practices to really create an environment where bias isn't impacting on the decisions of the recruiters. And we can do that. You know, there's things that we can do to the process that really mitigate the impact of that bias. But last week's session really did remind me of the assumptions that people are still constantly making in recruitment processes. And I think sometimes we, certainly those of us working in this field, move a bit further down the track and perhaps miss that some people are still right back at the beginning, where they are carrying some kind of deep-seated beliefs and ideas around people when they first meet them in interview processes, and how good or bad they may be at the job. And one of the topics that we talked really quite at length about was actually lack of experience being a reason why people were not being recruited into a job. And it was really interesting because in this particular workplace, it came out as such a strong theme that people were constantly being knocked back because they didn't have experience working in that particular industry, doing similar type of work. And what they realized as they were discussing this, that experience was actually really quite meaningless, and that in fact, many of the staff who had never done that type of work were actually better at the job and easier to work with because they just listened to the instructions and they learned the way that this organization did it, and they applied that learning and would do the job sometimes in a much better way than those who had come to the role with previous experience in the industry. And it's a really good reminder for everybody to think about, you know, if you've got a job ad and you're still asking for 5 years of experience doing a certain task, why? Why are you asking for that time over task? Does that really show you that that person is going to be great at that job? Probably not. It just shows you that they've done the job before. They might have done it really poorly. And people say, oh yeah, but we asked their referees and their referees said they were good at it. We know that a reference that a referee provides says much more about the referee than it does about the person they're providing the reference for. So our reliance on reference, and I've said this before and I'll say it over and over again, is way too strong and doesn't give us that ability to hire people based on potential. So that was a really good reminder that lack of experience, and also just our biases and assumptions around how somebody shows up to an interview. Even we talked about just the clothes that people wear and this idea that we need to, this particular organization had a requirement that one part of the uniform, they had to wear a uniform to work and that the uniform be ironed and well presented. Fair enough, right, in the workplace. And so they therefore realized that many of the assumptions they had made about people when they showed up for an interview might have been about their presentation, when in reality, if you really want to make sure that somebody shows up with, their uniform ironed each week, you may need to provide some equity there if they don't own an iron and haven't ever used an iron before. If the clothes that they found to show up to the interview are totally different to the clothes that they normally wear, and they had no idea how to really present themselves in a way that would be acceptable to the hiring managers. It's not that hard to teach somebody to iron or to buy them a $10 iron from Kmart, right? And that shouldn't be a barrier to them achieving employment with that organization, because they might be totally capable of showing up every day with their uniform ironed if they're provided with the right skills and knowledge to do so. So a good reflection point on experiences, on experience when it comes to recruitment, and also on the assumptions we make about people when we first see them. So please reach out if your organisation is looking for training around inclusive leadership, particularly. I'm booked up to the end of this financial year, but certainly have space for the second half of the calendar year. So if you want to get in, please get in soon and book those trainings in. Also, if you are keen to join our Diversity and Inclusion Network, we met again last week. We discussed how we align ourselves as people who are working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we align our goals with the goals of our organisation? How do we make that mesh? And how do we deal with the fact that sometimes that doesn't align, and that particularly working in this space, we want to do as much as we possibly can. We want to create equity for everybody. How do we prioritise and narrow it down so that we actually are we're getting the value that we can get out of the resources and the engagement levels that we have with our executive. So it was a really great discussion around that, and I really appreciated people's honesty and them bringing their own experiences and ideas to the conversation. And I look forward every month to these sessions. They're really great. So if you're interested, please head to the website. You'll find it under training as the Diversity and Inclusion Network. And we'd love to have you join us. You don't have to show up every month. You show up when you feel like showing up and when you feel that you're going to get something out of it. You can be quiet in the groups. You can contribute a lot. It's a really flexible network, and we'd love to have you join us. So I'll jump off now. That's enough from me on this kind of weird camera, half. Anyway, it's good to be able to chat about these issues. Please, interested in your thoughts, comments in the chat as always, and I will catch you next time with hopefully another guest. Bye.